Ex-Mill lied about a family emergency to make me watch my ex's kids during his wedding reception, so I called the police and CPS required them to take parenting classes. Then his family harassed me at work and left threatening notes on my car until I found out my ex had another secret ex-wife. I met Calvin, 31M, when I was 16 and he was 17 in our hometown of Bothell. We started dating in my junior year of high school. Everyone said we were perfect together. His family loved me. My family loved him. For the first 3 years, things were stable. We spent weekends together, went to the same parties, talked about our future. When we graduated high school, I went to State University for accounting. Calvin enrolled in the same school but for graphic design. The first semester, I noticed he stopped going to most of his classes. He would sleep until noon, play video games, then show up at my dorm around dinner. I asked him about his assignments. He said his professors were boring and he was learning more from YouTube tutorials. By second semester, he dropped out completely. He told everyone he was starting a freelance design business. What that actually meant was he designed a few logos for his uncle's plumbing company and his cousin's food truck. He made maybe $300 total that year. Meanwhile, I was taking 18 credit hours and working part-time at a bookstore. After I graduated, I got hired at a mid-sized firm in Bothell. Calvin was still doing his freelance work, which meant he worked maybe 5 hours a week. We were both 23 at that point. My parents started asking when we were going to get engaged. His parents did the same. His mother, Stephanie, 56F, would make comments every Sunday dinner about how she wanted grandbabies before she was too old to enjoy them. Calvin proposed on my 24th birthday. We were at the park where we had our first date. He got down on one knee with his grandmother's ring. I said yes because I loved him and because everyone expected it. But I told him that same night that I needed to wait on having children. I wanted to establish my career first, save money, maybe buy a house. I had just started my job. I was still paying off student loans. He looked right at me across the restaurant table and said he understood completely. He said we were a team and we would decide together when the time was right. He said he would never pressure me about kids. Those were his exact words. He said them twice because I asked him to repeat it to make sure we were clear. We got married 8 months later. The wedding was at Stephanie's church. We moved into a small house that his parents owned and rented to us at a reduced rate. It was a 2-bedroom place on Maple Street, about 10 minutes from my office. 1 week after the wedding, Calvin brought up stopping birth control at breakfast. I was eating cereal and getting ready for work. He said something about how I was 25 now and my biological clock was ticking. He mentioned that his mother had her first baby at 23 and that waiting too long could cause complications. He said we should start trying immediately. I reminded him about our conversation before the engagement. He acted like he did not remember it. He said I was being paranoid and that he only meant he would not pressure me before marriage. Now that we were married, it was different. I told him no. I told him I needed at least 2 more years to establish myself at the firm and save money. He did not speak to me for the rest of the day. The argument started happening every few days. He would find articles online about fertility declining after 30 and leave them on the Kit Connor counter. He started making comments about my coworker Kate, 29F, who had just announced her pregnancy. He would say things about how she was starting her family at the right time and how sad it would be if we missed our window. 3 months into the marriage, I came home early from work. I had a dentist appointment that afternoon, so I left the office around 2 p.m. When I walked into the bedroom, Calvin was sitting on the edge of the bed. The box of condoms from my nightstand drawer was open next to him. He had a safety pin in his hand. Several of the condom wrappers were on the bed and they had tiny holes poked through them. I asked him what he was doing. He did not look surprised or guilty. He just said he was helping us start a family since I was being stubborn about it. He said it like it was a reasonable thing to do. Like he was doing me a favor. I told him to pack a bag and leave. He refused. He said it was his parents' house and I could not kick him out. I said I did not care whose house it was, he needed to leave immediately. He stood up and got close to my face. He said I was being dramatic and that I would thank him later when we had a beautiful baby. I walked to the Kit Connor to get my phone. He followed me. I told him again to leave. He grabbed my wrist. I pulled away. He called me selfish. He said his mother had been right about me being too focused on my career. He said I was acting like a spoiled child who did not understand what marriage meant. I picked up my phone. He tried to take it from me. I stepped back. He raised his hand and hit me across the face. Not a push or a shove. An open-handed slap that made my ears ring. I stumbled backward into the Kit Connor counter. For a few seconds, I could not hear anything properly. Everything sounded muffled and far away. When my hearing cleared, he was crying. He kept saying he was sorry and that he did not mean it. He said I had pushed him too far. He said if I had just listened to him and been reasonable, none of this would have happened. He reached for me and I moved away. He started crying harder. He said he loved me and that he would never do it again. I called the police. He stopped crying immediately. He said I was insane. He said I was going to ruin his life over one mistake. I did not respond. I walked out to the front porch and waited. When the police arrived, I showed them the condoms with holes in them. I told them what happened. The officer asked Calvin to step outside. Calvin refused. He said he did not have to leave his own house. The officer asked him 2 more times. Calvin started yelling about how this was all my fault and how the police should not be involved in a private marriage dispute. They arrested him for assault and refusing to comply. The neighbors came out onto their porches. Mrs. Connor from next door asked if I was okay. I nodded. Calvin was shouting my name as they put him in the police car. He was still shouting when they drove away. I called my parents. They came over within 20 minutes. My father changed the locks that night. My mother helped me pack Calvin's clothes into garbage bags and left them on the porch. Stephanie called the next morning. She was crying. She asked why I had called the police instead of calling her and her husband first. She said they could have handled it as a family. She said now Calvin had an arrest record and it was going to affect his whole life. I told her that when someone is hitting you, you do not have the luxury of waiting to call family members first. You call the people whose job it is to help. She went quiet for a moment, then said she understood but that I had made everything worse. I hung up. Calvin was released 2 days later. His parents paid his bail. My parents hired me a lawyer. Calvin hired one too, paid for by Stephanie and her husband Frank, 58M. The divorce took 5 months. Calvin fought everything. He wanted the house even though his parents owned it. He wanted alimony even though he barely worked. He wanted half my retirement account that I had been contributing to since I was 22. His lawyer kept filing extensions and delays. Every court date got pushed back. My lawyer said Calvin was trying to drain my resources so I would settle for less. Finally, my lawyer made an offer. I would drop the criminal assault charges if Calvin agreed to a clean divorce with no alimony, no asset split, and no contact. Calvin's lawyer accepted within 2 hours. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday. I never saw Calvin again in person after the arrest. I moved into an apartment downtown. I blocked his number and all his social media accounts. I kept minimal contact with Stephanie. We had known each other for 9 years. She had been kind to me before the marriage fell apart. She would text me every few months to check in. I made one rule clear. We could have a relationship as long as she never mentioned Calvin. She agreed. 2 years passed. I got promoted to senior accountant. I bought a small condo. I went on a few dates but nothing serious. Stephanie texted occasionally. She would send me pictures of her garden or ask about my parents. She never brought up Calvin. I knew from her Facebook that he had gotten remarried and had 2 kids, but I never asked about it and she never volunteered information. Last month, Stephanie called me on a Saturday morning. She sounded frantic. She said there was a family emergency and she and Frank needed to leave town immediately. She said her sister in Ohio had been in a car accident and was in the hospital. She asked if I could come to her house right away. I drove over. When I got there, she was throwing clothes into a suitcase. Frank was loading bags into the car. Stephanie said they needed to leave within the hour to catch a flight. Then she said she had a huge favor to ask. Calvin's 2 kids were there. A boy, 4M, and a girl, 2F. Stephanie said their regular babysitter had canceled last minute and she had been watching them for the weekend. She said Calvin and his wife were unavailable. She said she just needed me to watch them for 2 or 3 hours until Calvin could pick them up. She said she had already called him and he was on his way. I hesitated. Stephanie grabbed my hands. She said she would never ask if it was not an emergency. She said Frank's sister was in critical condition and they needed to get to the hospital as fast as possible. The 2 kids were eating cereal at the Kit Connor table. They were not crying or upset. They seemed used to being at their grandmother's house. I said okay. Stephanie hugged me. She showed me where the snacks were and said Calvin would be there soon. She gave me the Wi-Fi password in case I needed to work. Then she and Frank left. I made the kids macaroni and cheese for lunch. They watched cartoons. I checked my phone. No messages from Stephanie or Calvin. I texted Stephanie asking for an update. No response. After 2 hours, I called her. It went to voicemail. I called Frank. Also, voicemail. I texted Calvin's old number that I had kept in my blocked contacts. The message did not deliver, which meant he had changed his number. After 3 hours, I started looking through Stephanie's Facebook on my phone. The most recent post was from that morning. It was a photo of flowers with a caption about beautiful weather for outdoor celebrations. I scrolled further. There was a post from 2 days earlier. It was a photo of a white dress with the caption about being so excited for the big day. Then I found it. A check-in at Bothell Gardens Event Center from that morning. The location tag showed it was a wedding venue. I searched Bothell Gardens on my phone. Their website showed they were hosting a wedding that day. The ceremony started at 1 p.m. It was 3 p.m. There had been no emergency. Stephanie had lied. She had used me to watch Calvin's kids so she and Frank could attend his wedding without arranging childcare. I called Calvin's number again using a different phone number I kept for work purposes. It rang. He answered. I asked him when he was coming to get his kids. He sounded confused. He asked why I was calling him. I said his mother had told me he was on his way to pick them up 3 hours ago. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he was at his wedding reception. He said his mother knew that. He asked why I was calling him on his wedding day. I heard a woman's voice in the background asking who it was. Then the woman grabbed the phone. She asked who I was and why I was harassing them on their wedding day. I started to explain. She cut me off and told me to leave them alone. Then she laughed and hung up. I sat on Stephanie's couch for a few minutes. The kids were still watching TV. They had not done anything wrong. None of this was their fault. I called the non-emergency police number. I explained the situation. I said I had been lied to and left with children who were not mine by someone who refused to come get them. I said I was worried about the legal implications of having custody of someone else's children without proper consent. The dispatcher said an officer would come to the house. I gave the address. The officer arrived 30 minutes later. I explained everything again. I showed him the text messages with Stephanie. I showed him the Facebook posts. I showed him my call log. The officer called CPS. A caseworker arrived an hour later. I gave a formal statement. I provided all the documentation. The caseworker tried calling both Stephanie and Calvin multiple times. No answer. The caseworker said they would need to take the children into temporary custody until they could reach the parents. I asked if I could stay with them until that happened. She said yes. We waited another hour. The kids fell asleep on the couch. Finally, the caseworker's phone rang. It was Calvin. She stepped outside to talk to him. When she came back, she said the parents were on their way. She said it would be at least 45 minutes because they were coming from the wedding venue. Calvin and his new wife arrived at 7 p.m. He did not look at me. His wife glared. The caseworker spoke to them outside. I could not hear what was said, but I could see Calvin's face getting red. His wife was crying. The caseworker came back inside and asked me to step out to give my final statement. I told her everything. She took notes. She thanked me for calling. She said I had done the right thing. I left. I drove home. I blocked Stephanie's number. I blocked Frank's number. That was 3 weeks ago. I have not heard from any of them since. I do not know what happened with CPS. I do not know if there were consequences. I do not regret calling. People are calling me vindictive for involving the authorities in a family matter, but I was lied to and manipulated. Was I wrong to call the police and CPS instead of just waiting it out? Update 1. People asked for an update, so here it is. After I made my first post, I did not hear anything from anyone for about a week. Then my mother called me. She said Stephanie had shown up at my parents' house unannounced on a Tuesday evening. My father answered the door. Stephanie asked to speak to me. My father told her I did not live there anymore and that she needed to leave. Stephanie started crying on the porch. She said she needed to talk to me urgently. My mother came to the door. Stephanie said there had been a misunderstanding and she needed my help to clear it up. My mother asked what kind of misunderstanding. Stephanie said it was about the CPS situation from the wedding day. My mother told her I had nothing to clear up and that Stephanie needed to leave. Stephanie said please just 5 minutes. My father said no and started closing the door. Stephanie put her foot in the doorway. She said CPS was refusing to close the case and she needed me to call them and explain that it was all a miscommunication. My mother asked what exactly she wanted me to say. Stephanie said I should tell them that I had overreacted because I was jealous about Calvin's wedding. She said if I explained that I had called the police out of spite, CPS would understand and drop the whole thing. My father told her to move her foot or he would call the police. Stephanie started saying something about how she had always treated me like a daughter. My mother cut her off and said that a mother does not lie to her daughter and abandon children with her under false pretenses. Stephanie's face changed. She pulled her foot back and left. My mother called me right after. She told me everything. She asked if Stephanie had tried to contact me. I said no. My mother said good and that I should keep it that way. I did not think much more about it for another week. Then I got a letter in the mail. It was from a lawyer representing Stephanie and Frank. The letter said I had made false statements to CPS that damaged their family's reputation. It said I had interfered in a private family matter out of personal vindictiveness related to my failed marriage to their son. It demanded that I contact CPS and recant my statement within 10 days or they would pursue legal action for defamation. I took the letter to my own lawyer. The same one who handled my divorce. She read it and actually laughed. She said it was nonsense. She said truth is an absolute defense to defamation and that everything I told CPS was documented and verifiable. She said Stephanie's lawyer was probably just trying to scare me into compliance. My lawyer drafted a response. It said I would not be recanting anything because I had told the truth. It said any further contact from Stephanie, Frank, or their legal representation would be considered harassment. It included a timeline of events with screenshots and documentation. My lawyer sent it certified mail. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days after my lawyer sent the letter, I started getting messages. Not from Stephanie or Frank directly, but from extended family members. Calvin's aunt messaged me on Facebook before I could block her. She said I had always been a selfish person and that I was punishing innocent children because of my grudge against Calvin. She said the kids had been traumatized by being taken by CPS and it was my fault. Calvin's cousin sent me an email. He said I should be ashamed of myself. He said Stephanie and Frank were good people who had made one mistake and I had blown it out of proportion because I could not move on from my divorce. He said everyone in the family knew what kind of person I really was now. I blocked everyone I could find. I made all my social media private. I changed my email settings to send anything from unknown addresses to spam. The messages kept coming through other channels. Someone left a note on my car in the parking lot at work. It said I was a vindictive person who could not let go of the past. It was not signed. I took it to building security. They checked the cameras but could not see who left it. My boss called me into her office one afternoon. She said someone had called the firm asking to speak to me. The receptionist had transferred the call to my extension but I was in a meeting. The person had then asked the receptionist about my job title and how long I had worked there. The receptionist thought it was strange and reported it. My boss asked if I was having personal issues that might affect my work. I told her a condensed version. I said my ex-husband's family was harassing me after a situation involving childcare and CPS. I said I had already contacted a lawyer. She said to let her know if it escalated and that the firm would support me. I thanked her and left. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. I did not answer. They left a voicemail. It was Calvin's wife. The new wife. The one from the wedding. She said I was a miserable person who could not stand to see Calvin happy. She said I had ruined their wedding day and their honeymoon because of my petty revenge. She said CPS had required them to take parenting classes before closing the case. She said they had to install cameras in their home for monitoring. She said their names were now in the system because of me. She said she knew where I worked and where I lived. She said I better watch my back. Then she hung up. I saved the voicemail. I sent it to my lawyer. My lawyer sent another letter to Stephanie's lawyer. This one included the voicemail transcript and said any further threats would result in a restraining order and a report to the police. Everything went quiet after that. No more messages. No more letters. No more calls. I thought maybe it was finally over. I started sleeping better. I stopped checking my car for notes. I stopped jumping every time my phone rang. Then yesterday morning, I saw a post shared in a local Facebook group. It was from one of Calvin's cousins. The post said there was a dangerous person in Bothell who was making false reports to CPS to hurt families. It did not name me specifically but it included details that anyone who knew the situation would recognize. It said people should be careful who they trust with their children. The post had been shared 40 times. There were comments. Some people were asking for more information. Others were defending CPS. A few people who knew me from high school had commented saying they knew who the post was about and that I was not that kind of person. I reported the post to Facebook. I sent screenshots to my lawyer. She said we now had grounds for a restraining order if I wanted to pursue it. She said we could also send a cease and desist letter that threatened legal action for continued harassment. I told her I wanted to wait. I wanted to see if it would die down on its own. She said that was fine but to document everything and contact her immediately if it escalated. That was 2 days ago. The Facebook post is still up. No one has contacted me directly. I am still going to work. I am still living my life. But I check over my shoulder more now. I take different routes home. I do not post anything on social media. People have asked if I regret calling CPS. I do not. I was abandoned with children who were not mine by people who lied to me. I protected myself legally and I protected those kids from being left with someone who had no legal authority to care for them. What Stephanie and Calvin did was not okay. The fact that they are facing consequences does not make me the villain. I do not know what happens next. I do not know if they will give up or if this will keep going. But I am not backing down. I did nothing wrong. Update 2: I was not planning to post again but things have developed in a way I did not expect. About 4 weeks after my last update, I got a call from a number I did not recognize with a local area code. I normally do not answer unknown numbers anymore, but this one had called 3 times in one afternoon. I picked up. It was Calvin's wife. Not the new wife from the wedding. His first wife before me. Her name was Louise, 33F. I had known she existed but I had never met her or spoken to her. She said she had gotten my number from an old mutual friend and hoped it was okay that she was calling. I asked what she wanted. She said she had seen some of the Facebook posts about me from Calvin's family. She said she knew they were about me because she had gone through something similar years ago. She said she wanted to meet in person if I was willing. I was suspicious. I asked why she wanted to meet. She said she had information about Calvin that I might want to know. She said it might help my situation. I told her I would think about it. I called my lawyer first. I told her about the call. She said to be careful but that it might be worth hearing what this woman had to say. She said to meet in a public place and to record the conversation if it was legal in my state. I looked it up. My state is a one-party consent state, which means I can record a conversation I am part of without telling the other person. I called Louise back. I said I would meet her at a coffee shop downtown on Saturday afternoon. She agreed. She was already there when I arrived. She was sitting at a corner table with a folder in front of her. I sat down across from her. I put my phone on the table between us with the voice recorder running. Louise did not waste time. She said she had been married to Calvin for 11 months when she was 26. She said the marriage ended after he pushed her down a flight of stairs during an argument. She said she had filed a police report and gotten a restraining order. She said Calvin's family had harassed her for months afterward, claiming she was lying and trying to ruin his reputation. I asked why she was telling me this. She said because she saw what his family was doing to me and she recognized the pattern. She said they had sent her threatening letters. They had called her workplace. They had posted about her in local groups. She said it went on for almost a year before it stopped. I asked what made it stop. She opened the folder. Inside were printed copies of police reports, medical records, and court documents. She said she had kept everything from her marriage to Calvin and the aftermath. She said she still had the restraining order. She said she wanted me to have copies in case I needed them. I looked through the papers. There was a police report from 7 years ago describing an assault. There were photos of bruises on Louise's arms and back. There was a hospital record showing she had been treated for a sprained wrist and bruised ribs. There was a restraining order granted by the court that prohibited Calvin from contacting her or coming within 500 feet of her home or workplace. I asked if she would be willing to provide these to my lawyer or to testify if needed. She said yes. She said she had stayed quiet for years because she wanted to move on with her life. She said when she saw what was happening to me, she realized that staying quiet had not protected anyone. She said Calvin had clearly not changed and his family was still covering for him. We talked for another hour. She told me that Stephanie had called her multiple times during her marriage to Calvin, asking her to give him another chance. She said Frank had shown up at her apartment once to try to convince her to drop the restraining order. She said the family had painted her as unstable and vindictive to anyone who would listen. When we finished talking, Louise gave me her number. She said to call her if I needed anything. She said she wished someone had warned her about Calvin before she married him. I thanked her and left. I took the folder to my lawyer on Monday morning. She looked through everything. She said this was significant. She said if Calvin's family continued harassing me, we could use this to show a pattern of behavior. She said it also corroborated my account of what Calvin was capable of. My lawyer sent another letter to Stephanie's lawyer. This one included references to Louise's case without naming her specifically. It said we had evidence that Calvin had a history of violence and that his family had a pattern of harassment toward his ex-wives. It said any further contact would result in immediate legal action and that we were prepared to file for a restraining order if necessary. I did not hear anything for 2 weeks. Then I got a text from a number I did not have saved. It was Stephanie. She said she wanted to talk. She said she was sorry for how things had gotten out of hand. She said she never meant for any of this to happen. She said she hoped we could work things out like adults. I did not respond. I forwarded the text to my lawyer. My lawyer called Stephanie's lawyer and told him any further contact would result in us filing for a restraining order immediately. The text stopped. The Facebook post stopped. The harassment stopped. Last week, I saw Louise again. We met for lunch. She said she had heard from Calvin's aunt, who had somehow gotten her new number. The aunt had called her asking her to stay out of the situation with me. Louise said she told the aunt that she would testify against Calvin in court if needed and then hung up. Louise said she felt better having spoken up. She said keeping quiet had made her feel like she was still under Calvin's control somehow. She said helping me had helped her let go of some of that. We have stayed in touch. She is the only person who truly understands what it is like to deal with Calvin and his family. She said she tried to warn Calvin's current wife before the wedding but the wife blocked her immediately. I do not know if the harassment is over permanently or if they are just regrouping. My lawyer said to stay vigilant. She said to keep documenting everything. She said we have a strong case if we need to pursue legal action. For now, things are quiet. I go to work. I come home. I live my life. But I keep Louise's folder in my safe. Just in case. Update 3. This will be my last update because the situation has reached a conclusion of sorts. About 6 weeks after I last posted, I got a call from a detective with the Bothell Police Department. He said he was investigating a domestic violence incident and that my name had come up as someone who might have relevant information. He asked if I would be willing to come to the station to give a statement. I called my lawyer before agreeing to anything. She said it was probably related to Calvin and that I should cooperate. She offered to come with me. We went to the police station the next day. The detective explained that Calvin had been arrested 3 days earlier for assault. His current wife had called the police after he attacked her in their home. She had locked herself in the bathroom and called for help. When the police arrived, Calvin had refused to open the door. They had forced entry. Calvin's wife had visible injuries. The detective said she was in the hospital being treated for a concussion and fractured collarbone. The detective said Calvin's wife had mentioned during her statement that he had been arrested for assault once before during his first marriage to me. The detective said they were building a case and wanted to document Calvin's history. He asked me to describe what had happened during my marriage. I told him everything. The holes in the condoms. The manipulation. The slap. The arrest. The divorce. I provided copies of the police report for my case. I gave him my lawyer's contact information. The detective took notes for over an hour. When we finished, the detective thanked me. He said this information would be helpful. He said Calvin's wife was cooperating fully and that they had enough evidence to charge him with felony domestic violence due to the severity of her injuries. He said they were also looking into whether Stephanie and Frank could be charged with child endangerment related to the wedding day incident. My lawyer asked if I would need to testify. The detective said possibly, but that they would let me know. We left. I called Louise that evening. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said she was not surprised. She said she had always known he would hurt someone else eventually. She said she had tried to warn people but no one listened. Louise said the detective had called her too. She said she had already given her statement and provided all her documentation. She said she hoped this time there would be real consequences. 2 weeks later, I read in the local news that Calvin had been formally charged with aggravated assault and battery. His bail was set high. Stephanie and Frank posted it again. The article mentioned that Calvin had prior arrests for domestic violence and that the prosecutor was seeking the maximum sentence due to his history. There was a preliminary hearing last month. I did not attend but my lawyer went to observe. She said Calvin's wife testified. She said Stephanie and Frank sat behind Calvin in the courtroom. She said Calvin's wife described years of verbal abuse that had escalated to physical violence in recent months. She said the breaking point was when Calvin accused her of being a bad mother and threw her into a wall. My lawyer said Calvin's wife also mentioned the CPS case from the wedding day. She said she had not known at the time that Stephanie had lied to me. She said she found out weeks later when CPS interviewed her. She said she was horrified that Stephanie had abandoned her children with someone they did not know under false pretenses. She said it was one of many things that made her realize Calvin's family enabled his worst behaviors. The case is still pending. The trial is scheduled for next spring. The prosecutor has contacted me about testifying. I have agreed. Louise has also agreed to testify. In the meantime, Calvin's wife filed for divorce. She was granted an emergency protective order. She has full custody of the children. Calvin is allowed supervised visitation only. Stephanie tried to call me last week. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. She was crying. She said everything had fallen apart. She said Calvin was going to prison. She said her grandchildren had been taken away. She said it was not supposed to be like this. She said she had only ever tried to protect her family. I deleted the voicemail. I did not call back. Louise and I met for coffee yesterday. She said she finally felt like justice was happening. She said she wished it had happened sooner but that she was grateful it was happening at all. She said testifying at the trial would give her closure. I do not feel the same sense of closure yet. Maybe I will after the trial. Maybe I will never fully feel it. But I do know that I made the right choice when I called the police on my wedding day and again on Calvin's wedding day. I protected myself both times. I did what I had to do. Stephanie and Frank have not been charged with child endangerment. The detective said there was not enough evidence to pursue criminal charges. But CPS did open an investigation into their fitness as guardians. They are no longer allowed unsupervised visits with Calvin's children. That decision came from the court during the custody hearing. I have not heard from anyone in Calvin's family in over a month. I do not expect to hear from them again. I have moved on with my life. I got another promotion at work. I am seeing someone new. It is early but it is healthy and calm and everything my marriage to Calvin was not. This situation taught me that protecting yourself is not vindictive. Calling the authorities when you are in danger or when children are being neglected is not overreacting. Sometimes the people who call you vindictive are the ones who benefited from your silence. I am done being silent. I am done making myself small to make other people comfortable. I did nothing wrong and I will not apologize for surviving. This is my final update. I am closing this chapter. Thank you to everyone who supported me. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My wife demanded I block all our friends because her poem lost at our wedding talent show. She said, if you loved me, you'd choose me over them. Now she's dating someone new who follows her orders. I, 29M, never thought I'd be writing this kind of post. The short version is that my wife Morgan, 28F, organized a talent showcase at our wedding reception, got upset when her performance wasn't the favorite, and has now completely unraveled our marriage. Here's what happened. Morgan and I met during sophomore year of college. We dated for 6 years before I proposed last year. Throughout our relationship, Morgan always talked about wanting to be a writer. She submitted a collection of short stories to several publishers a few years ago but never got picked up. It was disappointing, but she seemed to move past it and focused on her job at a marketing firm. 3 months before our wedding, Morgan came up with the idea to have a small talent showcase during our reception. She explained that it would be a way to highlight our friends' talents and show how much we valued friendship alongside our marriage. I thought it was a bit unusual, but Morgan was excited about it, so I agreed. She planned to recite a poem she wrote specifically for the event. The theme was going to be about supporting each other while starting a new chapter in life. She invited her college friend Jenna, 28F, to sing an original song. A few other friends from our social circle also prepared performances. I invited my buddy Blake, 30M, to the wedding. Blake works as an accountant but has a home recording setup and makes music as a hobby. He's engaged to be married next year to his longtime girlfriend. The wedding itself went smoothly. The ceremony was beautiful, and the reception started out great. When it came time for the talent showcase, Morgan went first and recited her poem. It was nice, and people clapped appreciatively. Then Jenna performed her song, which was surprisingly good. The crowd seemed to really connect with it, and she received noticeably more applause than Morgan had. A few other friends performed after that. I didn't notice anything wrong until I looked over at Morgan during Jenna's applause. Her face had completely changed. She went from smiling to this cold, hard expression I'd never seen before. For the rest of the reception, she barely spoke to anyone, including me. When I asked if everything was okay, she just nodded and said she was tired. After Jenna's performance, Blake went up to her and complimented her song. I overheard him offering to help her record it properly on his equipment at home. They exchanged phone numbers, which seemed perfectly innocent to me. The day after the wedding, Jenna sent Morgan a text thanking her for organizing the talent show. She mentioned how excited she was about Blake's offer to help record her song and asked if Morgan wanted to get lunch as a thank you. I saw the message on Morgan's phone when she showed it to me with a scowl on her face. Instead of being happy for her friend, Morgan threw her phone on the couch and told me she regretted the whole talent show. Then she demanded that I block Blake on all social media and delete his number from my contacts. I asked her why, and she said he had no business offering to help Jenna with her music. I refused. Blake and I had been friends for years, and he hadn't done anything wrong. I told Morgan she should be happy for Jenna instead of being jealous. That led to our first major argument as a married couple. Morgan accused me of not taking her side and questioned my loyalty to her. The next day, Morgan called up some of our mutual friends from college to complain about Jenna. She described Jenna's thank you text as bragging and said Jenna wouldn't have this opportunity if it weren't for her talent show. When our friends asked to see the actual message, Morgan refused to show it to them. To my surprise, they didn't take her side. They told her she was overreacting and that she should be supportive of Jenna's opportunity. Morgan didn't like that response at all. She told them she didn't want to hang out with any of them for now because they weren't supporting her. This included me, apparently, since I also disagreed with her. 2 of our friends texted me privately to ask if Morgan was okay. They said her behavior seemed completely out of character and they were concerned. I was concerned too. In all our years together, I'd never seen Morgan act this way. I called my dad for advice. At first, he suggested giving Morgan a few days to calm down. The wedding had been stressful, and maybe she just needed time to decompress. But as the days passed and Morgan's fixation on the talent show and Jenna continued, my dad suggested we might need marriage counseling. He pointed out that demanding I cut off friends was an unhealthy way to start a marriage. When I brought up the idea of counseling to Morgan, she immediately shut it down. She said there was nothing wrong with her. According to Morgan, I was the problem because I wouldn't choose her over my friends. In her mind, if I really loved her, I would block Blake without question. As the days went on, Morgan's mood swings got worse. She would suddenly start venting about Jenna in the middle of dinner or while we were watching TV. Then she'd go completely silent for hours. I started to wonder if there might be something medically wrong with her, as this behavior was so different from the woman I'd known for years. When I pressed Morgan about why Jenna's potential music opportunity bothered her so much, she finally admitted it was connected to her failed attempt at publishing her stories. She felt that Jenna was getting an easy break while she had struggled and been rejected. She also blamed me for inviting Blake to the wedding, saying I should have known better than to bring someone who might like Jenna's song. 2 weeks after our wedding, things reached a breaking point. We had planned a honeymoon trip to Hawaii, but Morgan announced she was canceling it. She said she wouldn't go anywhere with me unless I cut off not just Blake, but all of our friends who had sided with Jenna. When I refused again, explaining that isolating ourselves from our support system wasn't healthy, Morgan called me entitled just like Jenna. She packed a bag and said she needed a break because I obviously didn't care about her feelings. Then she left our apartment and went to stay with her parents. She left behind most of her belongings, including her wedding ring on the bathroom counter. I tried calling and texting her multiple times over the next few days, but she didn't respond. I also tried contacting her parents, but they wouldn't answer my calls either. After nearly a week of silence, I talked to my dad again. He suggested that given how quickly and dramatically things had fallen apart, I should consider getting an annulment. He pointed out that Morgan's unreasonable demands, refusal to consider counseling, and now ghosting me were serious red flags that shouldn't be ignored. I sent Morgan one final message asking her to consider joint therapy. I told her I loved her but couldn't agree to cut off our entire social circle. She didn't respond. Then I saw she had posted on Facebook about the wedding. She claimed there's an unwritten rule that the bride should get the most applause at wedding talent shows. She accused the guests of betraying her by cheering louder for Jenna, and me of taking Jenna's side instead of supporting her. At that point, I decided my dad was right. This wasn't the person I thought I had married. Update 1: It's been a month since the wedding, and 2 weeks since my last post. Thank you for all the comments and messages of support. Many of you asked for more details about what happened, so here's where things stand now. After Morgan's Facebook post, I decided to talk to Blake directly about the situation. I wanted to understand exactly what had happened between him and Jenna at the reception, since it was apparently the trigger for all this drama. Blake and his fiancée had come over to our place for football games several times in the months before the wedding. Morgan had always been friendly with them, so her sudden hatred of Blake made no sense. When I explained Morgan's reaction and her demand that I cut him off, Blake was completely baffled. He laughed when I mentioned Morgan's belief that he was giving Jenna some kind of big break in the music industry. Blake clarified that he had only offered to let Jenna use his basic home recording equipment to make a better quality demo of her song. His exact words were that he had a microphone and audio interface in his spare bedroom, and Jenna could come over for dinner with him and his fiancée, then record in their basement. He even suggested she would need to pay someone else for professional mixing, as he was still learning that part himself. This was hardly the career-launching opportunity Morgan had built it up to be in her mind. It was just one friend offering another friend the use of some amateur equipment. A few days after my conversation with Blake, I received a letter from Morgan's parents. They asked me to pack up all of Morgan's belongings and leave them on their front porch on a specific date when they knew I would be at work. They included a set of demands about what should be packed and how, along with a warning not to attempt to see or speak to Morgan during the drop-off. I called my dad again to discuss the situation. He advised me to comply with the request to avoid any further complications, but to keep a detailed inventory of everything I packed. He also recommended I take photos of all the items before delivering them, in case there were any accusations about missing or damaged property later. The letter from Morgan's parents made no mention of our marriage or any plans for the future. It was as if they were helping their daughter move out of an ex-boyfriend's apartment, not dealing with the breakdown of a marriage that was less than a month old. I spent that weekend carefully packing Morgan's clothes, books, and personal items. As I worked, I found things that reminded me of our relationship: concert tickets we'd saved, birthday cards, photos from vacations. None of it matched up with the person who had stormed out of our apartment over a talent show. On the designated day, I dropped off the boxes at her parents' house as requested. I left a note asking Morgan to contact me about our legal situation, but I didn't receive any response. Later that week, I ran into one of our mutual friends at the grocery store. She told me Morgan had been telling people I was abusive because I refused to support her after the wedding. She claimed I had humiliated her by inviting Blake, knowing he would like Jenna's song better than her poem. This accusation floored me. Not only was it completely false, but it was also impossible for me to have known Blake would connect with Jenna's music or offer to help her record it. The whole narrative Morgan was spinning made no logical sense. The friend assured me that no one who knew us believed Morgan's story. In fact, most of our social circle was confused and concerned by her behavior. Several people had tried to talk to her, but she had cut off anyone who questioned her version of events. Another revelation came when I spoke with Jenna for the first time since the wedding. She told me Morgan had sent her a long, angry message accusing her of deliberately trying to upstage her at the wedding. According to Morgan, Jenna had known how important the talent show was to Morgan and had chosen a song specifically designed to get more applause. Jenna was hurt and confused by this accusation. She said Morgan had asked her to participate in the talent show because she was proud of Jenna's songwriting and wanted to showcase it. Jenna had spent weeks practicing her song to make sure it was perfect, as a way of honoring her friendship with Morgan. What struck me most about both of these conversations was how Morgan had completely revised history to make herself the victim. The talent show had been her idea, she had invited the participants, and she had promoted it as a celebration of friendship. Now she was acting as if it had been a competition that Jenna had maliciously won. I consulted with a lawyer about my options. Since we had been married less than a month, an annulment was possible in our state. The lawyer advised me to file the paperwork immediately, before the window for annulment closed. When I filed for annulment, I had to list a reason. I chose fraud because Morgan had essentially misrepresented herself throughout our relationship. The person who walked out of our apartment was not the same person I thought I had married. Morgan was served with the annulment papers at her parents' house. 3 days later, I received a text message from her, the first direct communication since she left. It consisted of just 3 words: "How dare you?" I didn't respond. At this point, any communication between us was best handled through legal channels. Update 2: It's been a month since my last update, and things have taken several unexpected turns. First, Morgan contested the annulment. Her lawyer filed a response claiming that I had abandoned her, not the other way around. According to her filing, she had only gone to her parents' house for a few days to clear her head, and I had used that opportunity to pack up her things, change the locks, and file for annulment without warning. This was completely false. I had the text messages proving she had declared she was taking a break from our marriage. I had witnesses who saw her leave with her bag. I had my phone records showing dozens of unanswered calls to her number. And I certainly never changed the locks, that was pure fabrication. My lawyer assured me that Morgan's claims wouldn't hold up in court, but the legal process would now be more complicated and expensive than I had hoped. Instead of a quick annulment, we were looking at either a contested annulment hearing or converting to a divorce case. While this was happening, Morgan ramped up her campaign against me among our social circle. She created a private Facebook group called Support for Morgan where she posted daily updates about her struggle with me. Someone who was added to the group took screenshots and sent them to me. In these posts, Morgan claimed I had engineered the whole talent show situation to humiliate her. She said I had secretly told people to cheer louder for Jenna. She even suggested that Blake and Jenna had been having an affair before the wedding, and I had known about it. The wildest claim was that I had married her for her family's money, they're middle class, just like my family, and had been looking for an excuse to leave her. According to Morgan, when the talent show didn't give me a reason to leave, I manipulated the situation until she was forced to go to her parents' house, then filed for annulment. None of this made any sense. Why would I spend 6 years in a relationship, plan a wedding, and go through with it, just to manufacture a bizarre talent show scenario to end the marriage 2 weeks later? The most concerning development came when Jenna received a cease and desist letter from a lawyer representing Morgan. The letter accused Jenna of intentional infliction of emotional distress and tortious interference with a marital relationship. It demanded that Jenna stop all contact with Blake and pay Morgan $25,000 for damages to her marriage. Jenna was terrified. She had never been involved in a legal dispute before and didn't know what to do. She forwarded the letter to me, and I immediately sent it to my lawyer. My lawyer confirmed the letter came from a real law firm but said the claims were absurd and unlikely to result in an actual lawsuit. She suspected it was an intimidation tactic rather than a serious legal threat. Nevertheless, she advised Jenna to consult with her own lawyer and keep documentation of all interactions with Morgan. Around this time, I also learned that Morgan had quit her job at the marketing firm. One of her coworkers, who was also a casual friend of ours, told me Morgan had been telling people at work that she needed to leave her job because I was stalking her there. The coworker knew this wasn't true, as I had never once visited Morgan at work, and she was concerned about Morgan's mental state. The final revelation came from Morgan's cousin, who reached out to me privately. She told me Morgan had behaved similarly once before, during their high school years. Morgan had been cast as the lead in the school play, but after receiving lukewarm reviews compared to a supporting actress, she had quit the drama club and spread rumors about the other girl. The cousin had assumed Morgan had matured past that behavior and was shocked to see it resurface. This information, while disturbing, provided some context for Morgan's extreme reaction to the talent show. Perhaps the pressure of the wedding had triggered an old pattern of behavior that had been dormant during our relationship. The annulment hearing was scheduled for the following month. My lawyer advised me to gather all evidence of Morgan's behavior, including screenshots of her Facebook posts, statements from witnesses at the wedding, and testimonials from friends who had observed her behavior afterward. I felt completely drained by the whole situation. What should have been the happy beginning of our married life had turned into a legal and emotional nightmare. Part of me still couldn't believe how quickly and completely things had fallen apart over something as trivial as a talent show. Update 3: The hearing for our annulment took place last week. I wasn't sure if Morgan would actually show up, but she did, accompanied by her parents and her lawyer. This was the first time I had seen her since she walked out of our apartment 2 months ago. She looked completely different. Her hair, which had always been long, was cut short. She was wearing clothes in a style I had never seen her wear before. But the biggest change was in her expression, cold and distant, as if we were strangers. The hearing itself was brief but intense. My lawyer presented the evidence we had gathered, the text messages, witness statements, and documentation of Morgan's behavior after leaving. Morgan's lawyer tried to portray me as controlling and manipulative, claiming I had orchestrated the talent show to embarrass Morgan. The judge seemed skeptical of both narratives and suggested that whatever had happened, it was clear the marriage had broken down irretrievably. She denied the annulment on technical grounds but granted an expedited divorce instead. As we were leaving the courtroom, Morgan approached me in the hallway. For a moment, I thought she might want to talk rationally about what had happened. Instead, she handed me an envelope and walked away without a word. Inside was a handwritten letter. In it, Morgan explained that she had always resented me for being too supportive of other people. She claimed that throughout our relationship, I had consistently paid more attention to our friends' achievements than to hers. The talent show was just the final proof that I didn't prioritize her above everyone else. The letter ended with a statement that she deserved someone who would put her first, always and unconditionally, even when she was wrong. She said she had realized during our separation that I was not that person and never would be. Reading the letter, I finally understood what had happened. Morgan had expected me to validate her anger at Jenna and Blake, regardless of whether it was reasonable. When I didn't, she saw it as a betrayal rather than as normal, healthy behavior. The next day, Blake called to tell me that Jenna had decided to record her song professionally at a small local studio. The whole experience with Morgan had made her more determined to pursue her music, not less. He asked if I wanted to come to the studio to watch the recording session, as several of our friends were going to be there for support. I agreed to go. Being around friends who had stood by me throughout this bizarre situation felt healing. Watching Jenna perform her song, the same one that had somehow triggered the collapse of my marriage, gave me a sense of closure. After the recording session, our friend group went out for dinner. For the first time in months, I spent an evening not thinking about Morgan or the divorce. We talked about normal things, jobs, movies, upcoming trips. It felt like stepping back into regular life. The divorce will be finalized in a few weeks. Fortunately, Morgan and I hadn't combined our finances yet, so the financial separation has been relatively straightforward. The emotional aftermath has been more complicated. I've had to explain to distant relatives and friends why my marriage ended after just 2 weeks. I've dealt with well-meaning people asking if we've tried counseling or suggesting it was just newlywed stress. I've removed and stored all the wedding photos and gifts. Morgan still occasionally posts about me on social media, though less frequently now. According to mutual friends, she's dating someone new already, a guy who apparently agrees with everything she says and has cut off friends at her request. As for me, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life. I moved to a new apartment to get a fresh start. I've reconnected with friends I had somewhat neglected during the wedding planning. I've taken on new projects at work to keep my mind occupied. Sometimes I still can't believe a simple talent show at our wedding reception ended up revealing such a fundamental incompatibility between us. If someone had told me on our wedding day that I would be divorced before the scheduled honeymoon, I would have thought they were joking. But I'm also grateful, in a way. Better to discover this side of Morgan now than years into our marriage, possibly with children involved. And I've learned an important lesson about what I need in a relationship: mutual respect, reasonable expectations, and the freedom to maintain friendships without constant loyalty tests. The talent show might have ended my marriage, but it also prevented me from spending years with someone who had a very different understanding of what marriage should be.